The rifle scope trembled against Elena Vasquez's cheek as another shot went wide, the distant target remaining mockingly untouched. Around her, the other recruits whispered among themselves. The Montana wilderness stretched endlessly beyond the Federal Sniper Training Facility, its autumn colors bleeding into the horizon like watercolor paint on wet canvas. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work. So if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. Vasquez. Staff Sergeant Morrison's voice cracked across the range like a whip. Pack it up. You're done for today. Elena's hands shook as she disassembled her weapon. 20 pairs of eyes burning into her back. Third day in a row, whispered Martinez, a cocky recruit from Texas whose every shot seemed to find its mark effortlessly. Maybe she should try accounting instead. Elena's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. She had learned long ago that silence was often the most powerful response, a lesson that had served her well in smoky cafes in Prague, in the shadowed alleyways of Istanbul, in boardrooms where men in expensive suits decided the fates of nations. But here, in this place where precision was everything and reputation meant survival, her silence felt like surrender. The training facility sprawled across 300 acres of rugged terrain, a monument to the art of long-range warfare. In 1987, it had graduated some of the most elite marksmen in federal law enforcement, men and women who could thread a bullet through a keyhole at 800 meters, who could end a hostage situation with a single, perfectly placed shot. The walls of the main building were lined with photographs of distinguished alumni, their faces stern and confident, their eyes holding secrets that Elena recognized all too well. Commander Chen watched from the observation tower, her weathered face impassive as she observed Elena's latest failure. At 52, Chen had seen hundreds of recruits pass through these gates. Some arrived with natural talent, others with raw determination. A rare few possessed both. Elena Vasquez, according to her file, should have been among the elite. Her psychological profile indicated exceptional stress tolerance. Her physical fitness scores were near perfect, and her background checks, what little was accessible, suggested a woman of unusual capability. Yet here she was, washing out in spectacular fashion. "Commander," said Lieutenant Hayes, Chen's second-in-command, as he joined her in the tower. "The Vasquez situation is becoming problematic. The other recruits are starting to question the selection process. Some are wondering if she has connections, if she's here because of politics rather than merit." Chen's gray eyes never left Elena's retreating form. "What do you know about her background, Hayes?" "Standard federal employee. Worked in various administrative positions. Clean record, no red flags, though." Hayes paused, consulting his tablet. "There are some gaps. Periods where her employment history gets a bit vague. Nothing unusual for government work, but still." "Gaps." Chen repeated the word like she was tasting something bitter. In her experience, gaps in federal employment records usually meant one of two things. Either someone was lying, or someone was very good at keeping secrets. Elena walked alone back to the dormitories, her boots crunching on the gravel path. The October air carried the scent of pine and wood smoke from the nearby town of Glacier Point, population 847, where locals had learned to mind their own business about the federal facility in their backyard. She passed the memorial wall where brass plates honored agents who had died in the line of duty. Their names blurred as she walked by, but she felt their weight nonetheless. In her sparse room, Elena picked up the wooden owl from her nightstand, a gift from her former handler, Dmitri. The owl had been a gift from Dmitri, her handler in Prague, 3 years ago when the world still made a different kind of sense. "Athena's companion," he had said in his careful English, smoke from his cigarette curling between them in the safe house. "Wisdom and patience, Elena. These are your weapons. Wisdom and patience." She almost laughed at the irony. "Here, where?" Split-second decisions and mechanical precision were everything. Her greatest strengths had become her greatest weaknesses. The patience that had allowed her to wait 6 months in Belgrade for the right moment to approach a target now translated into hesitation on the firing line. The wisdom that had kept her alive in situations where one wrong word could mean death now manifested as overthinking, second-guessing every adjustment to windage and elevation. That a knock at her door interrupted her brooding. "Come in." To her surprise, it was Rebecca Park, one of the other recruits, a former Army Ranger whose shooting was nearly as accurate as her reputation for kindness. Rebecca's compact frame filled the doorway, her Asian features softened by genuine concern. "Hey," Rebecca said, stepping inside without invitation. "Rough day?" Elena set down the owl, forcing a smile. "Is there any other kind here?" Rebecca laughed, settling into the room's single chair. "Fair point. Mind if I ask you something? And you can tell me to mind my own business if you want. Shoot." The word came out before Elena could stop it, and both women winced at the unintended irony. "Your stance is wrong," Rebecca said bluntly. "But it's not wrong like someone who doesn't know what they're doing. It's wrong like someone who learned to shoot differently. Like someone who's fighting muscle memory." Elena's pulse quickened, but her face remained neutral. "What do you mean?" "I mean, most people who can't shoot, they're all over the place. Inconsistent, but you're consistent in your mistakes. Every shot group's the same way, just not where you want them to go. That tells me your body knows how to shoot. It's just not the way we do it here." The observation was more astute than Elena had expected. Rebecca was right. Elena's body remembered a different kind of shooting, learned in different circumstances with different weapons for different purposes. Close quarters combat, moving targets, suppressed weapons where the goal was silence rather than precision. The kind of shooting that had kept her alive in Sarajevo when 3 men with ties to arms dealers had cornered her at an abandoned factory. "I appreciate the analysis," Elena said carefully, "but I think I'm just not cut out for this." Rebecca studied her for a long moment. "You know what's funny? I've been watching you when you don't know it. In the mess hall, walking around base. During PT, you move like someone who's been in the shit. Real shit, not training exercises. But then you get behind that rifle, and it's like you forget who you are." Before Elena could respond, Rebecca stood up. "Look, I don't know what your story is, and I won't ask. But if you want help figuring out how to translate what you know into what they want here, I'm available. No judgment, no questions." After Rebecca left, Elena sat in the gathering darkness of her room, turning the wooden owl over and over in her hands. Outside, she could hear the other recruits heading to the mess hall for dinner, their voices bright with the easy camaraderie of shared purpose. She envied them that simplicity. Her phone buzzed a text message from an unknown number. "How's the vacation going?" Followed by a smiley face emoji. Elena's blood turned to ice water. The number meant nothing, but the phrasing was unmistakable. Vacation had been Langley's code for deep cover assignments. Someone from her old life was checking in, and that meant either the agency still had plans for her, or someone wanted to make sure she stayed buried. She deleted the message immediately and turned off the phone. But the damage was done, the past she had tried so hard to leave behind was reaching across time and space to remind her that some doors, once opened, could never truly be closed. That night, Elena lay awake listening to the wind howl across the Montana plains, carrying with it the scent of snow and the promise of winter. Somewhere in the darkness, a coyote called to its pack, a sound both wild and lonely that seemed to echo the restlessness in her own soul. In the observation tower, Commander Chen worked late into the night, reviewing personnel files by lamplight. Elena's folder lay open before her, its contents maddeningly sparse. Standard employment history, routine security clearances. Nothing that explained either her presence here or her spectacular failure to perform. But Chen had not risen to command one of the nation's most elite training facilities by accepting mysteries at face value. She picked up her secure phone and dialed a number she had not called in 5 years. Colonel Patterson. Jim, it's Sarah Chen. I need a favor. Sarah? Christ, it's been forever. What can I do for you? I need you to run a name through your channels. Elena Vasquez. I've got her in my program, and something doesn't add up. A pause. What kind of something? The kind that suggests someone's file has been sanitized. The kind that makes me wonder if I'm training a sniper or harboring a ghost. Elena Vasquez, Patterson repeated slowly. Give me 24 hours, and Sarah? Be careful who you trust with whatever I find. The line went dead, leaving Chen alone with her questions and the growing certainty that Elena's story was far more complicated than anyone at the facility suspected. Outside, the Montana night pressed against the windows like a living thing, keeping its secrets close while the wind whispered promises of revelation to come. Elena's alarm pierced the pre-dawn darkness at 0500 hours, the same time it had sounded every morning for the past 3 weeks. She rolled out of bed with mechanical precision, her feet finding the cold linoleum floor as muscle memory took over. Shower in 3 minutes flat, a habit from Prague's safe houses where hot water was a luxury and long showers were an invitation for unwanted attention. Uniform pressed and boots polished to mirror shine. Another remnant from a life where appearances could mean the difference between blending in and standing out fatally. The mess hall buzzed with the low murmur of early risers fueling up for another day of precision training. Elena grabbed a tray and loaded it with protein eggs, turkey sausage, wheat toast, food chosen for function rather than pleasure. She had learned long ago that the body was a tool, and tools needed proper maintenance. Mind if I sit? Rebecca's voice carried the same warmth it had the night before. Elena gestured to the empty chair across from her. Free country. Barely, Rebecca said with a grin, settling down with her own Spartan breakfast. So I've been thinking about what we talked about yesterday. Have you? Elena kept her tone neutral, but internally she felt the familiar spike of alertness that came when someone showed too much interest in her personal business. Look, I know you think I'm being nosy, but I've got a theory. Rebecca leaned forward, lowering her voice. You ever do any competitive shooting before coming here? Maybe in college or something. The question was innocent enough, but Elena heard the probing underneath. Rebecca was fishing and doing it skillfully. Elena had to admire the technique, even as she prepared to deflect it. Some, Elena said, which was technically true. Learning to kill quietly at various distances could be considered a form of competition, depending on how you looked at it. What kind? Practical shooting? Long range? Elena took a bite of eggs, buying time to craft her response. The truth was that her shooting experience was vast and varied, but explaining that would require explaining why a supposed administrative worker needed to know 17 different ways to eliminate a target from concealment. Hunting, mostly, she said finally. My father used to take me deer hunting up in northern Michigan. Nothing fancy. It was a safe lie, grounded in just enough truth to be believable. She had indeed spent time in northern Michigan, though it had been surveillance training rather than family bonding, and the targets had been far more dangerous than deer. Rebecca nodded thoughtfully. That might be part of the problem. Hunting teaches you different fundamentals than what we need here. When you're tracking game, you're thinking about movement, breathing patterns, heart rate. But here, we need you to think more like a machine. The irony was almost painful. Elena had spent years learning to be human in situations where humanity was a liability. How to show just enough emotion to seem genuine. How to laugh at jokes that weren't funny. How to cry at appropriate moments when tears could open doors that force could not. Now she was being asked to become mechanical, and her body was rebelling against the very programming that had kept her alive. After breakfast, Elena made her way to the range where Sergeant Morrison was already setting up targets at various distances. The morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine needles and the distant smoke from the groundskeeper's brush pile. Other recruits were arriving in small groups, their easy chatter filling the space between Elena and the rest of the world. "Vasquez." Morrison's voice cut through the morning calm. "You're up first today. Range time is precious, and we need to see if yesterday's coaching session had any effect." Elena felt every eye turn toward her as she approached the firing line. Martinez smirked from his position near the equipment shed, while Williams, a SEAL, former Marine whose accuracy was legendary, watched with the clinical interest of someone observing a train wreck in slow motion. The rifle felt heavier today, its weight settling into her hands like an accusation. Elena checked the chamber, verified her ammunition, and settled into position. Through the scope, the target at 300 meters looked impossibly small, a black circle on white paper that might as well have been a mockery of her supposed abilities. "Take your time," Morrison said, his voice carrying just a hint of hope. "Remember what we worked on yesterday. Breathing, natural point of aim, follow through." Elena closed her eyes for a moment, trying to quiet the storm in her mind. In another life, she would have been calculating wind speed, ambient temperature, the target's likely movement patterns. She would have been thinking about escape routes and backup plans, about what to do when the shot brought unwanted attention. Here, all of that was stripped away, leaving only the pure mechanics of putting a bullet exactly where you wanted it to go. She opened her eyes and found the target through the scope. Breathe in, breathe out. Find the natural pause between heartbeats. Her finger found the trigger, and for just a moment, the old training took over. Time slowed. The world narrowed to nothing but the target and the crosshairs and the gentle pressure of her index finger. The shot surprised her as it should have, and she watched through the scope as her bullet struck. 6 inches low and 4 inches left of center. "Damn it, Vasquez." Morrison's frustration boiled over. "You're pulling your shots. You're flinching like a rookie who's never held a weapon before." But Elena wasn't flinching. She was compensating, her muscle memory automatically adjusting for the sound suppression and reduced powder charges she had grown accustomed to in the field. Her body expected a different weapon with different characteristics, and every shot was fighting against years of deeply ingrained habits. "Let me try something," Rebecca said, stepping forward. Morrison looked like he wanted to object, but Rebecca had already proven herself as one of the program's most promising candidates. "Elena, can you show me your shooting stance from when you used to hunt?" Elena hesitated. Her actual field shooting stance involved positions and techniques that would raise immediate questions. Urban-prone positions, designed for shooting from concealment. Standing shots braced against doorframes and windowsills, the kind of practical fieldcraft that had nothing to do with hunting deer in Michigan. Instead, she demonstrated a modified version, something that might plausibly come from a civilian hunting background while incorporating elements of the training that had kept her alive. "Interesting," Rebecca murmured, studying Elena's position. "Your body is trying to get compact, minimize your signature. That's actually good instinct for field work, but here we want you stable and extended." Rebecca guided Elena through a series of adjustments, her hands professional and impersonal as she corrected angles and positions. "Try this. Don't fight your instincts, completely use them, but adapt them to what we need here." Elena settled back into position, this time allowing her body to find a compromise between what it remembered and what the situation demanded. The rifle felt marginally more familiar, though still wrong in ways she couldn't fully articulate. Her next shot was closer, still not perfect, but within the acceptable margin for a struggling student rather than a complete failure. "Better," Morrison admitted grudgingly. "Whatever you just changed, keep doing it." Over the next hour, Elena's shots gradually improved. Not enough to put her among the program's stars, but enough to keep her from being the complete disaster she had appeared to be. Each small success felt simultaneously like progress and betrayal, progress toward the goal of completing the program. Betrayal of the deeper truth about who she really was and why she was here. During the lunch break, Elena found herself walking alone along the perimeter trail, a winding path that circled the facility's outer fence. The Montana landscape stretched endlessly in all directions, big sky country where a person could lose themselves in the vastness of it all. She had always been drawn to places like this, spaces where the horizon was far enough away that you could see trouble coming, where the silence was so complete that any disturbance would stand out like a gunshot. Her phone buzzed again, another message from the same unknown number. Heard you're making new friends. Be careful who you trust. Creating these detailed stories requires significant time and research. If you're finding value in this thriller, please take a moment to like this video and share it with others who enjoy suspenseful narratives. Elena's jaw tightened as she deleted the message. Someone was monitoring her progress, and that someone had access to information about her day-to-day life at the facility. The implications were troubling. Either the agency was keeping tabs on her despite their agreement that she was permanently out, or someone else was taking an unhealthy interest in her activities. She thought about Rebecca's kindness, Morrison's frustrated attempts to help her improve, even Martinez's casual cruelty. How many of them were exactly what they seemed, and how many had hidden agendas? In her old life, she would have assumed everyone was lying until proven otherwise. Here, she was trying to learn to trust again, and that trust felt as foreign as the rifle in her hands. That evening, Elena sat in her room with her laptop, ostensibly reviewing shooting techniques and ballistics tables. In reality, she was conducting the kind of background research that had once been her specialty. Rebecca Park, former Army Ranger, exemplary service record, parents in California, younger brother in medical school. Nothing unusual, nothing that suggested anything other than exactly what she appeared to be. But Elena had learned long ago that the most dangerous people were often those who appeared most innocent. In Istanbul, her closest friend had been a literature professor who collected rare books and spoke 7 languages. He had also been selling weapons to 3 different terrorist organizations and had tried to kill her with poisoned coffee when he realized she was getting too close to the truth. The wooden owl watched her from the knitstand, its mother-of-pearl eyes reflecting the lamplight like stars. Dimitri's gift, but also his warning. Wisdom meant knowing when to trust and when to run. The problem was, Elena had been running for so long that she had almost forgotten how to do anything else. A soft knock interrupted her brooding. This time, it was Williams, the ex-Marine whose shooting was so accurate it bordered on supernatural. Vasquez? Got a minute? Elena gestured him in, noting how he automatically scanned the room before entering, old habits from someone who had seen real combat. Heard you had a better day on the range, Williams said, settling into the chair that was becoming a popular spot for late-night visitors. Marginally less embarrassing, Elena agreed. Williams laughed, a sound with no humor in it. You know what? I think you're holding back. And I think you know exactly what you're doing when you hold back. Elena's pulse quickened, but she kept her expression neutral. What makes you say that? Because I recognize the look. I've seen it in guys who came back from tours where they had to do things they don't want to talk about. Guys who learned to shoot in situations where missing meant their buddies died, but talking about it meant court-martial or worse. He leaned forward, his eyes serious. I'm not asking what your story is, but if you're here because someone in Washington thinks this place can help you find your way back to who you used to be, then maybe you should stop fighting it so hard. After Williams left, Elena lay on her narrow bed staring at the ceiling, his words echoing in her mind. Find her. Way back to who she used to be. The problem was, she wasn't entirely sure who that person had been. Before Prague, before Istanbul, before the safe houses and dead drops and carefully constructed lies, there had been someone else. A young woman who believed in right and wrong, who thought that serving her country meant protecting innocent people from those who would do them harm. That woman had died gradually, one compromise at a time, until all that remained was Elena Vasquez, professional ghost, expert in the art of becoming whoever she needed to be to complete the mission. But here, in this place where precision and truth were everything, she was being asked to become herself again, and she was no longer sure who that person was. Outside her window, the Montana night pressed close, vast and empty and full of secrets that the darkness held close like a mother protecting her children from harm. The storm arrived on Elena's fourth week at the facility, rolling in from the northwest with the kind of authority that made even the Montana natives take notice. Elena watched from the mess hall windows as gray clouds swallowed the mountains, turning the landscape into something that belonged in a Gothic novel rather than a federal training ground. "No range time today," announced Sergeant Morrison as he entered the mess hall, rainwater dripping from his jacket. "We'll be moving to classroom instruction and equipment maintenance." The groans from the assembled recruits were audible, but Elena felt a flutter of relief. Another day, without having to perform the delicate balancing act of appearing competent enough to stay in the program while maintaining the fiction that she was just a struggling administrative worker learning to shoot. The relief was short-lived. "Vasquez," Morrison continued, his eyes finding her in the crowd. "Commander Chen wants to see you in her office, now." The mess hall went quiet. In 4 weeks, Elena had never seen a recruit called to the commander's office for anything good. Martinez's smirk was particularly pronounced as Elena stood and made her way toward the exit. Commander Chen's office occupied a corner of the main administrative building, its windows offering a panoramic view of the training grounds and the wilderness beyond. The walls were lined with commendations, photographs from various military and law enforcement ceremonies, and a collection of challenge coins from units that Elena recognized from her other life units whose existence was classified and whose members were never officially acknowledged. "Sit," Chen said without preamble as Elena entered. The commander's gray eyes were unreadable as she studied Elena across her desk. "We need to talk." Elena took the offered chair, her posture erect but not rigid, her hands relaxed but ready. "Old habits, yes ma'am." 4 weeks, Chen said, opening Elena's file. 4 weeks of the most inconsistent shooting I've seen in 20 years of running this program. Some days you can barely hit the broad side of a barn. Other days you show flashes of genuine skill. Yesterday you put 3 shots in a 4-inch group at 400 meters, then followed it up with 5 shots that missed the target entirely. Elena said nothing. What could she say? The truth that her good days came when she managed to overcome years of training in completely different shooting disciplines, and her bad days came when that training reasserted itself was not an option. "Your psychological evaluations are equally inconsistent," Chen continued. "Dr. Martinez, our staff psychologist, not the recruit, describes you as compartmentalized to an unusual degree for someone with your stated background. Her assessment suggests you have experience managing stress that goes far beyond what a typical federal administrative worker would encounter." The walls seemed to be closing in. Elena forced herself to breathe normally, to maintain the slight confusion and concern that would be appropriate for someone who didn't understand what was happening. "Ma'am, I'm not sure what you're getting at. I know I'm struggling with the shooting requirements, but tell me about Prague." The words hit Elena like a physical blow. She managed not to flinch, but something must have shone in her eyes because Chen's expression sharpened like a hawk spotting prey. "Prague?" Elena kept her voice level. "I've never been to Prague, ma'am." "Haven't you?" It wasn't a question. Chen opened a manila folder and withdrew a photograph grainy surveillance footage showing a woman entering a cafe, her face partially obscured, but her build and posture unmistakably Elena's. This was taken 14 months ago outside Café Louvre in Wenceslas Square. The woman in the photograph meets with a known intelligence operative for 47 minutes before leaving separately. Elena's mind raced. That photograph should not exist. The operation in Prague had been sanitized. All evidence scrubbed, all connections severed. The fact that Chen had access to it meant either the agency's security had been compromised, or Elena's extraction from active duty had not been as complete as she had been led to believe. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but I think there's been some mistake." "That's not me." Chen reached for another photograph. This one showed Elena at a different angle, her face clearly visible as she walked away from the cafe. Even without advanced facial recognition software, the identification was unmistakable. "Elena Vasquez," Chen said slowly. "Also known as Elena Petrov, also known as Sarah Mitchell, also known by at least 4 other aliases according to the intelligence reports I've been able to access. CIA operative specialized in human intelligence, gathering and asset recruitment. Officially listed as killed in action in Sarajevo 18 months ago." The room spun slightly. Elena gripped the arms of her chair, fighting the urge to run or attack or do any of the dozen things her training screamed at her to do when her cover was blown. Instead, she forced herself to look confused and slightly frightened, the reaction of an innocent person being accused of something impossible. "Ma'am, I don't know what this is about, but I swear to you, I've never worked for the CIA. I've never been to Prague or Sarajevo or anywhere like that. I've spent my entire career pushing papers and processing forms. There has to be some kind of mistake." Chen studied her for a long moment. "The interesting thing about this situation, Vasquez, is that officially you're right. According to every database I can access through normal channels, you are exactly what you claim to be. Boring government. Worker, unremarkable background, no red flags." She leaned back in her chair. "But I've been in this business long enough to know that sometimes the most interesting stories are the ones that have been carefully erased. And I've been around classified operations long enough to recognize someone who's been through the kind of training that doesn't show up on standard personnel files." Elena felt sweat beading on her forehead, despite the air conditioning. This was the nightmare scenario she had been dreading. Someone with enough clearance and persistence to dig past the carefully constructed cover story that was supposed to be her new life. "Ma'am, I really don't know what to tell you. Maybe I have one of those faces that shows up in surveillance footage. Maybe there's another Elena Vasquez who looks like me. I can't explain photographs I've never seen of places I've never been. Can't you?" Chen stood and walked to the window, her silhouette dark against the storm-lashed glass. "Let me tell you what I think happened. I think someone very important decided that Elena Vasquez, the CIA operative, needed to disappear permanently. I think they created Elena Vasquez, the administrative worker, as a way to bury the past while still keeping a valuable asset available if needed." She turned back to Elena. "And I think whoever made that decision sent you here, not because you needed sniper training, but because they needed you tucked away somewhere secure while they decided what to do with you next." Elena's throat was dry. That's insane. Why would anyone do something like that?" "Because spies who know too much have a funny way of dying in accidents," Chen said bluntly. "Car crashes, muggings gone wrong, sudden heart attacks. Much safer to give them new identities and stick them somewhere remote until the heat dies down." The casual way Chen discussed assassination sent a chill down Elena's spine. How much did this woman know about the darker side of intelligence work? And more importantly, what did she plan to do with that knowledge? "I want to help you," Chen said, returning to her desk. "But I can't help someone who won't admit they need help. So I'm going to ask you one more time. Who are you really, and why are you here?" Elena met the commander's eyes, seeing intelligence and determination and something that might have been compassion. For a moment, She was tempted to tell the truth, to unburden herself of the weight of deception and trust that Chen would understand. But trust was a luxury she couldn't afford. Not when she still didn't know who had sent that photograph or why. "Ma'am, I'm Elena Vasquez, GS-12 Administrative Specialist, and I'm here because I want to serve my country in a more meaningful way than processing paperwork. I know that's not the answer you want to hear, but it's the only answer I have." Chen stared at her for a long moment, then closed the file with a decisive snap. "Very well, you're dismissed, but Vasquez, this conversation isn't over. And the next time we talk, I hope you'll be ready to be honest with me." Elena stood on unsteady legs and made her way to the door. As she reached for the handle, Chen's voice stopped her. "One more thing. Be very careful who you trust here. Not everyone at this facility is what they appear to be, and some people might have agendas that don't align with your best interests." Elena left the office with her mind spinning. The warning could mean anything: that Chen suspected other recruits or instructors of being undercover, that she knew more about Elena's situation than she had revealed, or that Elena was walking into a trap that had been months in the making. The storm was worsening as she made her way back to the dormitories, rain lashing the buildings with increasing fury. She passed other recruits hurrying between buildings, their faces hidden beneath rain hoods and turned-up collars. Any one of them could be watching her, reporting on her activities, waiting for the right moment to act. In her room, Elena sat on her bed and stared at the wooden owl, its carved features somehow accusatory in the lamplight. Dimitri's words echoed in her memory. "Wisdom and patience, Elena. These are your weapons." But what good were wisdom and patience when the ground kept shifting beneath her feet? Her phone buzzed. Another message from the unknown number. "Heard. You had an interesting conversation today. Time to consider your options." This time Elena didn't delete the message immediately. Instead, she studied it, looking for clues about the sender's identity. The phrasing was American, educated, someone familiar with intelligence terminology. The timing suggested access to real-time information about her activities. Either someone at the facility was reporting to an outside contact, or the facility itself was under surveillance. A knock at her door interrupted her analysis. Elena slipped the phone into her pocket and opened the door to find Rebecca standing in the hallway, soaked from the storm. "Hey," Rebecca said, pushing wet hair out of her eyes. "Heard Morrison called you to the commander's office. Everything okay?" Elena studied Rebecca's face, looking for signs of deception or hidden knowledge. She saw only concern and genuine friendship, but then, Elena had been fooled by genuine-seeming concern before. "Just a routine check-in," Elena lied. "Chen wanted to discuss my progress, see if there was anything they could do to help me improve." "Good," Rebecca said, relief evident in her voice. "I was worried they might be considering dropping you from the program." "Not yet," Elena said, "though I'm still on thin ice." They stood in uncomfortable silence for a moment, the sound of rain against the windows filling the space between them. Finally, Rebecca spoke. "Elena, can I ask you something? And you can tell me to mind my own business if you want." Elena's pulse quickened, but she nodded. "Are you okay? I mean, really okay? Because sometimes you get this look, like you're waiting for something bad to happen. And I know that look because I've seen it in combat veterans who've been through some serious shit." The observation was uncomfortably accurate. Elena had spent so many years in situations where violence could erupt without warning that hypervigilance had become her default state. But acknowledging that would raise questions she couldn't answer. "I'm fine," Elena said. "Just stressed about the program. I really want to succeed here, and the pressure is getting to me." Rebecca nodded, but Elena could see she wasn't entirely convinced. "Well, if you ever want to talk, I'm here. And I mean that, no judgment, no questions you don't want to answer." After Rebecca left, Elena locked her door and wedged a chair under The handle an old habit from hostile territories where hotel room locks were more suggestion than security. She turned off the lights and moved to the window, using the reflection in the dark glass to keep an eye on the hallway while she processed what had happened. Chen knew who she was, or at least suspected it. Someone was monitoring her activities and sending cryptic messages. And now Rebecca was asking uncomfortable questions about her behavior patterns. The walls were closing in from multiple directions, and Elena wasn't sure who to trust or where the real threats were coming from. Outside, the storm raged with increasing intensity, wind howling across the facility like the voices of the dead, calling for justice. Elena had learned long ago that storms always passed, but they often left destruction in their wake. The question was whether she would survive this one with her cover and her life intact. She retrieved her laptop and began typing a message in a secure encrypted format she hadn't used in months. If the situation was deteriorating as rapidly as it seemed, she might need to activate old contacts and contingency plans she had hoped never to use again. But as she stared at the blank screen, Elena realized she wasn't sure who she could trust. With a message like that, the next morning brought no relief from the storm, either meteorological or personal. Elena woke to the sound of rain still hammering against her window and the buzz of her phone, indicating yet another message from her. Mysterious correspondent. Package arriving today. Be ready. This time, the message carried an urgency that made Elena's skin crawl. In intelligence parlance, package could mean anything from information to weapons to a person, usually someone whose arrival would change the dynamics of a situation dramatically. Elena deleted the message and prepared for what felt increasingly like a final confrontation. The morning briefing was held in the main conference room, all 32 recruits crammed into a space designed for 20. The air was thick with the smell of wet wool and nervous sweat as Morrison stood at the front of the room, his usual crisp appearance slightly wilted by the humidity. Due to the weather, we're implementing modified training protocols, Morrison announced. Advanced tactical shooting in the indoor range, equipment maintenance, and psychological evaluations for selected personnel. Elena's stomach dropped. Psychological evaluations were never random, and given yesterday's conversation with Chen, she had little doubt she would be among the selected personnel. Martinez, Williams, Park, Vasquez, Morrison continued, confirming Elena's fears. Report to Dr. Martinez's office at 1400 hours. Everyone else, indoor range for close-quarters combat drills. The day crawled by with agonizing slowness. Elena went through the motions of cleaning her rifle, reviewing ballistics tables, and participating in classroom discussions about wind drift and bullet drop. But her mind was elsewhere, cataloging escape routes, analyzing potential threats, and preparing for whatever the afternoon would bring. Dr. Sarah Martinez's office was located in the medical wing, a sterile environment that smelled of antiseptic and fear. Elena had undergone dozens of psychological evaluations in her career, most conducted by psychiatrists who had security clearances higher than most generals. She knew how to give the right answers, how to project stability while revealing nothing of substance. But as she sat in the waiting area, watching Martinez the recruit, not the doctor, emerge from his session, looking pale and shaken, Elena wondered if the usual tactics would be sufficient. Elena Vasquez? Dr. Martinez appeared in the doorway, a compact woman in her 50s with steel gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. Please come in. The office was designed to appear comfortable, soft lighting, upholstered chairs, a small table with tissues strategically placed, but Elena recognized it for what it was, an interrogation room disguised as a therapeutic space. Please, have a seat wherever you're comfortable, Dr. Martinez said, settling behind her desk with Elena's file already open. Elena chose a chair that gave her a clear view of both the door and the window, positioning herself at an angle that would allow quick movement in any direction. Old habits. I understand you've been having some difficulties with the program, Dr. Martinez began, her voice carefully neutral. Some, Elena admitted. I'm working to improve. Dr. Martinez made a note. Tell me about your motivation for joining this program. What made you decide to pursue sniper training? It was the same question Elena had answered during her initial interview, but now it felt loaded with additional meaning. I wanted to serve my country in a more active capacity. Administrative work is important, but I felt called to do something more direct. Called. Dr. Martinez repeated the word thoughtfully. That's interesting phrasing. Can you elaborate on what you mean by called? Elena hesitated. In her cover story, she was supposed to be a patriotic citizen inspired by current events to serve her country more directly. But under Dr. Martinez's penetrating gaze, the fiction felt increasingly inadequate. I suppose I wanted to make a difference, Elena said. To know that my work was protecting people directly, not just pushing paper around. And yet your performance has been inconsistent. Some days you show remarkable potential, others you struggle with basic fundamentals. How do you explain that? Nerves, I suppose. Performance anxiety. I know how much this means to me, and sometimes I think I try too hard. Dr. Martinez leaned forward slightly. Elena, I'm going to share something with you that might help explain your difficulties. I've reviewed your file, and I've also had some interesting conversations with Commander Chen. Elena's pulse quickened, but she kept her expression neutral. Oh? Your psychological profile is fascinating. You show markers consistent with someone who has experienced significant trauma, but also someone who has been trained to compartmentalize that trauma in very specific ways. Your stress responses are highly controlled, almost artificially so. The room felt like it was growing smaller. Elena gripped the arms of her chair and forced herself to breathe normally. I'm not sure what you mean, Elena said. I think you do. Dr. Martinez's voice was gentle but implacable. Elena, I've worked with intelligence operatives before. I know the signs of someone who's been through the kind of psychological conditioning that allows a person to function in extremely hostile environments. The pretense was crumbling, and Elena could feel herself being backed into a corner. But she had one card left to play, the confusion and fear of an innocent person being accused of something impossible. Dr. Martinez, I think there's been some terrible mistake. I've never worked in intelligence. I've never been in hostile environments. I'm just a government worker who wanted to do something meaningful with her life. Are you? Dr. Martinez opened another file, this one much thicker than Elena's official personnel record. Because I have reports here that paint a very different picture. Reports of a CI operative named Elena Vasquez who was involved in operations in Eastern Europe and the Middle East. Someone who was officially killed in action, but whose body was never recovered. Elena's world tilted on its axis. The reports Dr. Martinez was reading from should not exist. They were classified at levels that required presidential authorization to access. The fact that a facility psychologist had copies meant either the security breach was far worse than Elena had imagined, or this entire situation was a carefully orchestrated trap. That's impossible, Elena whispered, her voice barely audible. Is it? Elena, I want to help you. But I can't help someone who won't admit they need help. You're suffering from what we call operational stress syndrome, a condition that affects intelligence operatives who have been in deep cover for extended periods. Dr. Martinez leaned forward, her voice taking on the tone of someone delivering a diagnosis. Your shooting problems aren't about technique, they're about identity confusion. Part of you knows how to be a sniper very well, in fact. But another part of you is fighting that knowledge because acknowledging it means acknowledging who you really are. Elena stared at the doctor, her carefully constructed defenses crumbling like a dam under flood pressure. Everything Dr. Martinez was saying resonated with a truth Elena had been trying to deny. She was fighting her own training, her own instincts, because accepting them meant accepting that Elena Vasquez, the administrative worker, was a lie. "What do you want from me?" Elena asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I want you to stop running from yourself," Dr. Martinez said gently. "I want you to accept that you are who you are, and that there's no shame in needing help to find your way back to some version of normal." A knock at the door interrupted the moment. Dr. Martinez frowned. Sessions were not supposed to be interrupted except for emergencies. "Come in," she called. The door opened to reveal Commander Chen, her expression grim. "Dr. Martinez, I need to speak with Miss Vasquez immediately. We have a situation." Elena stood on unsteady legs, her mind reeling from the psychological bombardment she had just endured. As she followed Chen out of the office, she caught a glimpse of Dr. Martinez's notes, and one phrase stood out in bold letters: "Recommend immediate psychological intervention." The walk to Chen's office felt like a death march. Elena's training kicked and automatically assess threats, identify escape routes, prepare for multiple contingencies, but underneath the operational thinking was a growing sense that the game was finally up. Chen's office looked different in the gray stormlight. The shadows seemed deeper, the photographs on the walls more ominous. Chen closed the door and activated what Elena recognized as a white noise generator, a device used to prevent electronic surveillance. "Sit down, Elena," Chen said, her voice carrying none of its usual authority. Instead, Elena heard something that might have been sympathy. "We know who you are," Chen continued. "And more importantly, we know why you're here." Elena sat heavily in the chair, her defenses finally exhausted. "I don't suppose there's any point in continuing to deny it?" "None whatsoever." Chen activated her computer and turned the screen so Elena could see it. The display showed a classified CIA file with Elena's photograph and a notation that made her blood run cold. "Project Lazarus asset retrieval authorized." "Project Lazarus," Elena said slowly. "I've never heard of it." "It's new," Chen said. "Started about 6 months ago, after several high-value intelligence assets went missing or were compromised. The agency decided they needed a way to bring their people back from the cold without exposing them to the usual risks associated with extraction." Elena's mind raced. "So this facility is not just a sniper training school," Chen confirmed. "It's also a decompression center for intelligence operatives who need to be quietly reintegrated into normal society. You're not the first, and you won't be the last." The revelation hit Elena like a physical blow. Everything, her selection for the program, her struggles with the training, even Rebecca's friendship, had been carefully orchestrated. "Rebecca," Elena said suddenly. "Is she former CIA, like you?" "Her mission was to befriend you, assess your psychological state, and help ease your transition back to normal life." Elena felt sick. The one person she had begun to trust, the one relationship that had felt genuine in her new life, was just another layer of deception. "Why?" Elena asked. "Why not just give me a new identity and let me disappear completely?" Chen's expression darkened. "Because the agency has a problem. 3 operatives who went through the standard extraction process have died in the past year. Car accidents, muggings, heart attacks, all seemingly random. But the pattern suggests someone is hunting former intelligence assets. So you brought me here to what, use me as bait? To keep you safe while we figure out who's targeting former operatives and why," Chen corrected. "But also to determine whether you could be trusted with the truth, and whether you might be willing to help us solve this problem." Elena laughed bitterly. "Help you? After lying to me for months, after orchestrating this entire charade, you want my help? Elena, I understand your anger. But right now, you may be the only person who can help. You stop whoever is killing former CIA operatives. Because we think the person responsible might be someone you know very well." Chen opened another file, this one containing surveillance photographs from various locations around the world. Elena recognized several faces, former colleagues, handlers, assets she had worked with in various operations. Every person in these photographs is dead, Chen said quietly. Killed in the past 18 months, all made to look like accidents or random crimes. But there's a pattern, and that pattern suggests the killer has access to classified information about CIA personnel and operations. Elena studied the photographs, her trained eye noting details that would escape civilian observers. The locations, the timing, the methods, they all suggested someone with extensive knowledge of intelligence operations and access to resources that went far beyond what a typical assassin would possess. You think it's someone from inside, Elena said. We're certain of it. The question is who, and more importantly, how do we stop them before they kill again? Chen leaned back in her chair. Elena, I'm going to be completely honest with you, probably for the first time since you arrived here. We need your help because you know these people, you understand how they think, and you have skills that most of our current operatives lack. And if I refuse, then you'll be relocated again, given another new identity, and spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder while former colleagues continue to die. Elena closed her eyes, feeling the weight of impossible choices pressing down on her shoulders. Outside, the storm continued to rage, and somewhere in the darkness, Elena could feel the presence of old enemies and older secrets stirring to life. When she opened her eyes again, Commander Chen was watching her with the patience of someone who understood that some decisions could not be rushed. What exactly are you asking me to do? Elena asked. Chen reached into her desk drawer and withdrew a secure tablet, its black screen reflecting the storm-lashed windows like a dark mirror. Before I answer that question, there's something else you need to see. The tablet came to life with Elena's touch, revealing a secure video conference interface. 3 faces appeared on the screen, 2 Elena recognized immediately, 1 she had hoped never to see again. Hello, Elena. The voice belonged to Deputy Director Marcus Webb, her former supervisor at Langley. His silver hair was perfectly styled despite the late hour, his blue eyes as calculating as ever. I apologize for the deception, but circumstances required careful orchestration. Beside Webb sat Dr. Patricia Henley, the CIS chief psychologist, her expression unreadable behind wire-rimmed glasses. But it was the third face that made Elena's blood turn to ice water, Dmitry Volkov, her former handler, supposedly killed in a car bombing in Moscow 8 months ago. Surprised to see me, little owl? Dmitry's accent carried the same mixture of warmth and menace Elena remembered from their operations in Eastern Europe. The use of his pet name for her, a reference to the carved owl he had given her, felt like a violation. You're supposed to be dead, Elena said, her voice steady despite the chaos in her mind. Death, like many things in our profession, is often a matter of perspective, Dmitry replied. I am dead to those who need to believe it, but very much alive to those who require my services. Webb leaned forward on the screen. Elena, we need you to understand the scope of what we're dealing with. The systematic elimination of former CIA operatives isn't random, it's strategic. Someone is removing people who possess specific knowledge about specific operations. Operations you were involved in, Dr. Henley added. Prague, Istanbul, Belgrade, Sarajevo, all locations where you worked with assets who are now dead. Elena's mind raced through the implications. You think someone is cleaning house, eliminating anyone who could expose something that happened during those operations. We know someone is cleaning house, Webb corrected. The question is what they're trying to hide, and whether you're on the elimination list or part of the cleanup crew. The accusation hit Elena like a physical blow. You think I'm the one killing our former colleagues? The possibility has been considered, Webb said with bureaucratic coldness. You're one of the few operatives from those missions still alive. You have the skills and knowledge necessary to locate and eliminate the targets. And you conveniently died in Sarajevo just before the killings began. Elena stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. This is insane. You faked my death, created this elaborate cover story, brought me here under false pretenses, and now you're accusing me of being a serial killer. Not accusing, Chen interjected. Testing. Everything that's happened here has been designed to assess your psychological state and determine whether you pose a threat to other former operatives. The shooting problems, Elena realized. The psychological evaluations, Rebecca's friendship. It was all designed to break down my defenses and see how I'd react. Rebecca's friendship is genuine, Chen said quietly. Her mission was to befriend you, yes, but her caring for you is real. That's one of the conclusions we've reached. You're not a sociopath hunting former colleagues. You're a traumatized operative trying to build a normal life. On the screen, Dmitri smiled coldly. Which brings us to why I am here, little owl. If you are not the predator, then you are the prey, and bait. Elena turned back to the tablet. Bait? Webb nodded. We believe the real killer will eventually come for you. You know too much about too many operations to be left alive indefinitely. So we're going to make sure you're ready when they arrive. Ready how? By turning you back into what you used to be, Dr. Henley said. A fully operational CIA assassin. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Elena had spent months trying to bury that part of herself, to become someone who could live with the memories of what she had done in service to her country. Now they were asking her to resurrect the killer she had fought so hard to leave behind. And if I refuse, then you die, Dmitri said bluntly. If not by the killer's hand, then by mine. Because if you will not be the weapon we need, then you become a liability we cannot afford. Elena looked around the room, taking in Chen's sympathetic expression, the faces on the tablet screen, the storm still raging outside. Every option led to violence. Every choice required her to become something she no longer wanted to be. There's something else, Webb continued. Something that might help you make your decision. We know who the killer is. The tablet screen changed, displaying a photograph that made Elena's knees weak. The face was older, marked by years and violence, but unmistakably familiar. Agent Michael Reeves, her former partner from the Prague operation, the man who had supposedly died saving her life when their cover was blown. Michael's alive, Elena whispered. Very much so, Webb confirmed. And very much responsible for the deaths of at least 17 former CIA operatives. We believe he's been systematically eliminating everyone who knew about Operation Nightfall. Operation Nightfall. Elena hadn't heard that designation in years, but the memories came flooding back with crystalline clarity. Prague, 3 years ago. A mission that had gone sideways when their target, a Russian arms dealer named Kozlov, had turned out to be working for American interests. The subsequent cover-up had involved falsified reports, eliminated witnesses, and the official deaths of everyone involved. Kozlov wasn't just an arms dealer, Elena said, the pieces falling into place. He was one of ours. A double agent who had been feeding us information about Russian weapons sales for 5 years, Webb confirmed. His elimination was authorized at the highest levels to prevent a diplomatic incident. But the mission team knew too much about the operation to be left alive. So you killed us all officially and gave us new identities, Elena continued. Except Michael really did die, didn't he? At least you thought he did. He was caught in the explosion that was supposed to kill you both, Dr. Henley explained. But he survived, badly injured and presumed dead. By the time we realized our mistake, he had disappeared. Elena closed her eyes, remembering that night in Prague. The safe house, the sound of approaching sirens, Michael pushing her toward the back exit while he stayed behind to buy her time. The explosion that had brought down half the building, the flames that had consumed everything she had thought she knew about loyalty and sacrifice. He's been hunting us ever since, Elena realized. Everyone who knew about Nightfall, everyone who could expose what really happened. And now he knows you're alive. Dmitri added. Your presence here was never as secret as you believed. Michael has contacts throughout the intelligence community, people who owe him favors or fear his retribution. As if summoned by the mention of his name, Elena's phone buzzed with another message. This time, the sender was no longer anonymous. Michael Reeves. Elena, we need to talk. Come alone to the old ranger station on Highway 2. You have 2 hours. Come armed. Elena showed the message to Chen, who immediately activated her radio. All units, we have a code black situation. Lock down the facility immediately. No one enters or leaves without my authorization. But even as Chen issued orders, Elena knew it was too late. Michael had spent 3 years preparing for this confrontation. 3 years planning his revenge against the people who had betrayed him. He wouldn't be deterred by facility security or lockdown procedures. He's not going to wait, Elena told Chen. Michael was always impatient, always preferred direct action to elaborate planning. If I don't show up at that ranger station, he'll come here and people will die. Then we'll be ready for him, Chen replied. No, Elena said quietly. You won't. You don't understand what he's become. What 3 years of thinking he was betrayed by his own people has done to him. Michael was the best partner I ever had, smart, ruthless, completely dedicated to the mission. Now all of that focus is turned toward killing anyone connected to Operation Nightfall. She looked around the room, seeing the faces of people who had become important to her, despite the deception underlying their relationships. Rebecca, who had genuinely tried to help her find some measure of peace. Morrison, who had pushed her to be better despite his frustration with her performance. Even Chen, who had orchestrated this elaborate charade, but had done so to protect her. I have to go, Elena said. Absolutely not, Webb's voice crackled from the tablet. We're not losing. Another operative to Reeves. The facility will be reinforced, additional security measures implemented. And how many innocent people will die while you're implementing those measures? Elena interrupted. How many recruits who had nothing to do with any of this will become collateral damage because you're too proud to let me handle this my way? She turned to Chen. You brought me here to turn me back into an operative. Congratulations, mission accomplished. Now let me do what operatives do. Chen studied Elena's face for a long moment. What do you need? A weapon. Something with more stopping power than the training rifles, and a vehicle. Elena, Dr. Henley's voice from the tablet carried a warning tone. Your psychological evaluation indicates significant trauma associated with violent confrontation. Are you certain you're prepared to face someone you once cared about? Elena picked up the wooden owl from Chen's desk where it had been placed among her personal effects. Dmitri's gift, a reminder of wisdom and patience. But sometimes, Elena reflected, wisdom meant knowing when patience was no longer an option. Michael made his choice 3 years ago when he decided to hunt down former colleagues, Elena said. Now I have to make mine. She looked directly at the tablet screen, meeting Dmitri's cold eyes. You want to know if I'm still an operative? If I still have what it takes to do what needs to be done? I guess we're about to find out. The storm outside seemed to intensify as Elena prepared to leave, as if the weather itself understood that something terrible was about to unfold in the Montana wilderness. But for the first time in months, Elena felt the clarity that came with accepting who she really was, not the administrative worker she had pretended to be, not the struggling recruit she had played at being, but Elena Vasquez, CIA operative. Expert in the art of staying alive when everyone around her wanted to die. The only question now was whether 3 years of trying to be someone else had dulled her edges too much to face the ghost of her former partner, and whether she could. live with herself afterward. Regardless of how the confrontation ended, the ranger station sat like a cancer on the landscape, its weathered wood siding and broken windows testament to years of abandonment. Elena parked the borrowed facility vehicle 200 meters away, using a stand of pine trees as concealment while she studied the terrain through binoculars. The storm had passed, leaving behind a crystalline clarity that made every detail stand out with hyper-real precision. Michael's choice of location was tactically sound: multiple escape routes, clear fields of fire, natural concealment positions. It was also psychologically significant. They had used this same ranger station as a safe house during their operation in Montana 4 years ago, back when they were hunting a domestic terrorist cell with connections to foreign weapons suppliers. Back when they trusted each other with their lives. Elena checked her weapon one final time, a modified M4 carbine that Chen had reluctantly provided, along with enough ammunition to fight a small war. The familiar weight of the rifle felt different now than it had during training exercises. This wasn't about precision or technique. This was about survival, and her body remembered lessons that her conscious mind had tried to forget. Her phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca. "Whatever happens out there, know that your friendship meant something to me. Come back safe." Elena allowed herself a small smile. Despite the deception that had brought them together, Rebecca's caring was genuine, perhaps the only authentic relationship Elena had managed to build in her new life. It was worth fighting. To preserve. Movement in the ranger station's main window caught her attention. Michael's silhouette, unmistakable even after 3 years and whatever injuries he had sustained in Prague. He was positioned to cover the main approach, but Elena knew his habits well enough to anticipate his blind spots. She moved through the forest with the fluid silence of someone who had learned to walk among enemies without being detected. Every step was calculated, every breath controlled, every sense attuned to the possibility of ambush. This was the Elena that had survived operations in 7 countries, the woman who had once spent 48 hours in a Moscow safe house with 3 dead bodies while waiting for extraction. The ranger station's back door hung crooked on its hinges. Victim of countless harsh winters and the occasional visit from local wildlife. Elena tested each step as she approached, feeling for loose boards that might betray her presence. The musty smell of decay and abandonment filled her nostrils as she slipped inside. "I know you're here, Elena." Michael's voice carried from the main room, unchanged despite everything that had happened. "Still moving like a ghost, I see. Some skills you never lose." Elena positioned herself behind a doorway where she could see Michael's reflection in a broken mirror mounted on the far wall. The years had not been kind to him. His left arm hung at an awkward angle, suggesting permanent damage from the Praga explosion. Burn scars covered the visible portions of his neck and face, and his once athletic build had been reduced to gaunt angles that spoke of chronic pain and constant vigilance. "Hello, Michael," Elena said, stepping into view with her weapon raised but not immediately threatening. "You look like hell." He laughed, a sound with no humor in it. "Feel like it too. Amazing what 3 years of being officially dead can do to a person." "You could have contacted me," Elena said. "Could have let me know you were alive instead of hunting down everyone we used to work with. Could I?" Michael turned slowly, his own weapon a sniper rifle Elena recognized as the same model they had used in Prague, tracking her movement. "After you left me to die in that explosion? After you let them tell the world that Michael Reeves was killed in action while Elena Vasquez mysteriously disappeared?" The accusation hung between them, like a physical barrier. Elena forced herself to remember that night from Michael's perspective: the flames, the collapsing building, the sound of sirens growing closer while his partner fled to safety. "I thought you were dead," Elena said quietly. "I saw the building come down. There was no way anyone could have survived that explosion. But you didn't stay to make sure, did you?" Michael's finger moved closer to his trigger. You ran, just like they trained you to do. Mission first, partners expendable. That's not fair, and you know it. You told me to run. You pushed me toward that back exit and stayed behind to cover my escape. I stayed behind to buy you time to complete the mission, Michael corrected. To get the intelligence we had gathered about Kozlov's network. Instead, you used that time to save your own skin while leaving me to burn. Elena felt the weight of 3 years' worth of survivor's guilt pressing down on her shoulders. He wasn't entirely wrong. She had prioritized her own survival over attempting a rescue. But she had also known that staying would have meant both of their deaths, and Michael would have done the same thing in her position. What happened after the explosion? Elena asked, Michael's scarred face twisted into something that might have been a smile. I woke up in a Moscow hospital 3 days later. Turns out our friend Kozlov had people watching the safe house, people who pulled me out of the wreckage before the authorities arrived. They thought I might have valuable information about American intelligence operations. The implication sent a chill down Elena's spine. They tortured you. For 6 months, Michael confirmed. Wanted to know everything about Operation Nightfall, about the other operatives involved, about what the Americans really knew about their arms-dealing network. I gave them nothing, Elena, nothing. I know you didn't, Elena said, and meant it. Michael's loyalty had never been in question, even now when that loyalty had been twisted into something murderous. Do you? Michael's weapon shifted slightly, now pointed directly at Elena's center mass. Because I found out some interesting things during those 6 months. Like how Operation Nightfall wasn't really about stopping Russian arms dealers. It was about eliminating a double agent who knew too much about American operations in Eastern Europe. Elena's blood turned to ice. Kozlov. Kozlov was working for us, Elena. Had been for years. But he had started asking uncomfortable questions. About American weapons sales. About which conflicts we were secretly funding and which governments we were quietly destabilizing. So someone in Washington decided he needed to be eliminated. The revelation hit Elena like a physical blow. Everything she had believed about their mission, about the moral justification for what they had done, crumbled like a house built on sand. We were assassins, Michael continued. Not intelligence operatives protecting American interests, but hired killers cleaning up an embarrassing mess. And when the mission was complete, we became the mess that needed cleaning up. Elena's weapon trembled in her hands as the full scope of the betrayal became clear. The explosion. It wasn't enemy action. Our own people tried to kill us, Elena. The same people who are now using you as bait to draw me out so they can finish the job they started in Prague. The ranger station fell silent except for the sound of wind through broken windows and the distant cry of a hawk circling overhead. Elena felt the foundations of her worldview shifting beneath her feet. Everything she had believed about duty and loyalty and serving her country revealed as carefully constructed lies. Then why are you hunting former operatives? Elena asked. If we were all victims of the same betrayal, why kill people who were as deceived as we were? Because some of them figured it out, Michael said. Started asking questions, making connections, threatening to expose what really happened during Operation Nightfall. They had to be silenced before they could reveal the truth. So you silenced them. I gave them a choice, Michael corrected. The same choice I'm giving you now. Disappear completely, never speak about what happened in Prague, or face the consequences of trying to expose people who are very good at making problems. Disappear permanently. Elena studied Michael's face, looking for any trace of the man who had once been her partner, her friend, someone she had trusted with secrets she had never shared with anyone else. What she saw instead was the hollow-eyed determination of someone who had lost everything except the need for revenge. How many refused your offer? Elena asked. All of them. Michael's finger tightened on the trigger. Just like you're going to refuse. You're right, Elena said quietly. I am going to refuse, but not for the reasons you think." She slowly lowered her weapon, a gesture that took every ounce of courage she possessed. "Michael, I'm not refusing because I want to expose what happened in Prague. I'm refusing because what you've become isn't who you used to be. The Michael Reeves I knew would never have killed 17 people to keep a secret. The Michael Reeves you knew died in that explosion," Michael replied. "What survived is something else entirely." "No," Elena said firmly. "What survived is someone who's been hurt so badly that he's forgotten what he was fighting for in the first place. You think killing former operatives is protecting them from our handlers. It's not. It's just making you into the same kind of monster that tried to kill us in Prague." For a moment, something flickered in Michael's eyes: doubt, pain, maybe even recognition of the truth in her words. But it passed quickly, replaced by the cold determination that had kept him alive for 3 years of hiding and hunting. "It doesn't matter," Michael said. "What's done is done. The only question now is whether you're going to join them or join me." "There's a third option," Elena said. "Is there? We walk away. Both of us. Leave all of this behind and find some way to build lives that aren't defined by what happened in Prague." Michael laughed bitterly. "You think it's that simple? You think we can just forget about the people who betrayed us, the colleagues who died because of their lies? I think we can choose not to let their betrayal turn us into killers of innocent people," Elena replied. "I think we can honor our fallen colleagues by refusing to become the monsters our handlers always suspected we were." The standoff stretched between them, two former partners separated by years of pain and mistrust and the weight of terrible choices. Outside, the Montana wilderness waited with the patience of geological time, indifferent to human struggles and human suffering. Elena's phone buzzed with an incoming call from Chen. She let it go to voicemail, but the interruption seemed to break Michael from whatever internal struggle he was fighting. "They're coming for you, Elena," Michael said. "Right now, probably. Your Commander Chen and her team, maybe federal backup, certainly enough firepower to level this entire area if necessary. They're using you as bait, just like I said." Elena heard it then, the distant sound of helicopter rotors approaching from the south. Michael was right. Chen had followed her despite agreeing to let her handle the confrontation alone. The realization that she was still being manipulated, still being used as a piece in someone else's game, filled Elena with a rage that surprised her with its intensity. "Last chance, Elena," Michael said, raising his rifle. "Come with me now, or die here with the people who betrayed us both." Elena looked at Michael, really looked at him for the first time since entering the ranger station. Beneath the scars and the hollow determination, she could see traces of the man who had once saved her life in Sarajevo, who had shared terrible jokes during long surveillance watches in Istanbul. Elena looked at Michael, really looked at him for the first time since entering the ranger station. Beneath the scars and the hollow determination, she could see traces of the man who had once saved her life in Sarajevo, who had shared terrible jokes during long surveillance watches in Istanbul, who had taught her how to make decent coffee with nothing but instant powder and suspicious water from questionable sources. "You're right about one thing," Elena said, the helicopter sound growing louder. "We were both betrayed. But Michael, look what it's done to you. Look what you've become." "I've become what they made me," Michael replied, but his voice carried less conviction than before. "No," Elena said firmly. "You've become what you chose to become. Just like I chose to try to build something different after Prague. The people who betrayed us, they don't get to define who we are unless we let them." The helicopter was close now, maybe 2 minutes out. Elena could hear the deeper rumble of ground vehicles approaching from multiple directions. Chen had brought significant backup, which meant she expected this confrontation to end badly. "They're going to kill us both," Michael said, glancing toward the sound. "The moment they have clear shots, we're both dead. Loose ends that need tying up." Elena considered this possibility. Her phone buzzed again, another call from Chen that she ignored. But this time she noticed something else. A text message from an unknown number with a brief, cryptic content. Package delivered. Exit north. Transport waiting. The message could mean anything, but Elena's instincts told her it was genuine help, possibly from sources she had worked with in the past. People who owed her favors, or who had their own reasons for wanting her to survive. This confrontation. "Michael," she said urgently, "we have maybe 90 seconds before this place is surrounded. I'm going to ask you one more time. Do you want to spend whatever time you have left hunting ghosts and killing people who never deserved to die? Or do you want to try to find some way to live with what happened to us?" For a moment, Michael's scarred face showed something that looked almost like hope. "Elena, even if I wanted to, what I've done, the people I've killed, there's no coming back from that." "Maybe not completely," Elena admitted. "But there might be a way forward that doesn't involve more death." The sound of boots on gravel indicated that Chen's team was taking positions around the ranger station. Elena could see muzzle flashes through the broken windows, not weapons fire, but laser sights painting targets on every possible exit route. "Elena Vasquez." Chen's amplified voice echoed across the clearing. "Michael Reeves, you're surrounded by federal agents. Exit the building slowly with your hands visible." Elena looked at Michael, seeing her own grim understanding reflected in his eyes. They both knew how these situations typically ended, with the supposed threats eliminated and the official reports describing a tragic but necessary use of force. "The north exit," Elena said quietly. "There's a game trail that leads to a logging road about half a mile through the forest. Someone left me a message suggesting transport would be waiting." "Someone?" Michael's training kicked in despite everything. "Elena, this could be another trap." "Everything's a trap," Elena replied. "The question is whether we spring it together or let Chen's people end this for us." Michael was quiet for a long moment, his fingers still resting on his rifle's trigger. Elena could see him weighing options, calculating odds, trying to decide whether death might be preferable to whatever uncertain future awaited them both. "The people I killed," Michael said finally. "They weren't all innocent. Some of them were dirty, Elena. Some of them were working with the same people who betrayed us." "Maybe," Elena said. "But some of them were just trying to survive, same as us. Some of them had families, people who loved them, lives that mattered beyond whatever classified operations they'd been involved in." "Elena Vasquez," Chen's voice again, more urgent now. "You have 60 seconds to exit the building." Elena made her decision. She slung her rifle across her shoulder and moved toward the ranger station's back rooms, toward the exit that might lead to freedom or might lead to another carefully orchestrated trap. After a moment's hesitation, she heard Michael following her. The rear of the building opened onto a dense stand of pine trees, their branches heavy with recent rain and morning frost. Elena could hear voices and movement in multiple directions. Chen's people were professional and thorough, but they couldn't cover every possible escape route in terrain this vast and complex. "This way," Elena whispered, leading Michael along. A deer path that wound between trees thick enough to provide concealment from overhead surveillance. Her CIA training kicked in automatically stay low, move quietly, use natural cover. Assume you're being watched even when you can't see watchers. Behind them, she heard Chen counting down over the loudspeaker. 30 seconds. "After that, we're coming in." Elena and Michael moved through the forest like the ghosts they had been trained to be, covering ground quickly while leaving minimal trace of their passage. Elena's phone buzzed with GPS coordinates. Someone was indeed tracking their location and providing updated navigation toward whatever extraction point awaited them. They reached the logging road just as Elena heard the sound of flashbang grenades detonating back at the ranger station. Chen's team was moving in, probably finding nothing but empty rooms, and the echo of conversations that had changed everything. A nondescript sedan waited at the coordinates, its engine running and driver's side door open. Behind the wheel sat a woman Elena didn't recognize. Asian features, professional appearance, the kind of carefully neutral expression that screamed intelligence operative. "Elena Vasquez?" the woman asked as they approached. "I'm Agent Kim. We need to move quickly. Who sent you?" Elena asked, her hand instinctively moving toward her weapon. "People who have their own reasons for wanting you both alive and free," Kim replied. "People who believe the truth about Operation Nightfall deserves to see daylight." Michael grabbed Elena's arm. "It's another trap." "It has to be." "Maybe," Elena said, studying Kim's face and finding nothing but professional competence and genuine urgency. "But staying here definitely gets us killed." The sound of helicopters was growing closer again. Chun's people had probably discovered their escape route and were repositioning to cut off their escape. Elena made the same kind of split-second decision that had kept her alive through 7 years of operations in hostile territory. She got in the car. After a moment's hesitation, Michael joined her in the back seat. Kim put the vehicle in motion immediately, driving with the kind of controlled aggression that suggested extensive training in evasive maneuvering. "Where are we going?" Elena asked. "Somewhere safe," Kim replied. "Somewhere you can both disappear completely if that's what you choose, or somewhere you can decide how you want the truth about Operation Nightfall to be revealed." Elena looked at Michael, seeing uncertainty and exhaustion warring with the paranoia that had kept him alive for 3 years. "What truth?" Kim glanced in the rearview mirror. "The truth that Operation Nightfall wasn't an isolated incident. The truth that there have been dozens of similar operations over the past decade, with the same pattern: eliminate inconvenient assets, then eliminate the operatives who carried out the eliminations. A systematic cleanup operation," Michael said slowly, "using American intelligence operatives to kill other American intelligence operatives." "Exactly. And you two are among the last surviving witnesses to how the system really works." Elena felt pieces clicking into place in her mind. "The people you work for, they want to expose this?" "They want to stop it," Kim corrected. "But exposure might be necessary to make that happen." The sedan wound through mountain roads that Elena didn't recognize, heading generally northwest toward what she assumed was the Canadian border. Behind them, the sound of pursuit was fading. Either Chun's people had lost their trail, or Kim's extraction was more sophisticated than it appeared. "What happened to the others?" Elena asked. "The operatives Michael killed, were they really working against us?" Kim was quiet for a moment. "Some were. Some were just trying to build normal lives and got caught in the crossfire. That's the nature of these situations. Once the killing starts, it's hard to distinguish between guilty and innocent." Michael stared out the window at the passing landscape. "I told myself they were all dirty, that they all deserved what happened to them. Maybe some did," Elena said quietly. "But that doesn't make you judge, jury, and executioner." "No, Michael agreed. It doesn't." They drove in silence for the next hour, each lost in their own thoughts about choices made and paths not taken. Elena found herself thinking about Rebecca, wondering if her friendship would survive the revelation that Elena had disappeared without explanation. She thought about Morrison and his frustrated attempts to help her improve her shooting. She thought about Commander Chen and whether the woman's sympathy had been genuine or just another layer of operational cover. "There's something else you both need to know," Kim said as they approached what appeared to be a small private airfield. "The facility you were at, it wasn't just a decompression center for former operatives. It was also a testing ground." "Testing? For what?" Elena asked. "To see if former CIA assets could be successfully reprogrammed for domestic operations. The people who run these programs are always looking for new ways to use experienced operatives without the complications that come with traditional recruitment and vetting." Elena felt sick. Even her attempt to build a normal life had been part of someone else's agenda, another manipulation designed to serve interests she couldn't even identify. So what now? Michael asked as Kim parked near a small jet that was clearly waiting for them. Now you choose, Kim said, turning to face them both. Disappear completely, new identities, new lives, enough resources to start over anywhere in the world. Or help us expose what happened to you and dozens of others, knowing that it will make you permanent targets for very dangerous people. Elena looked at the jet, then at Michael, then at her own hands. These hands had killed people in service to her country. They had also tried to save lives, had reached out in friendship, had attempted to build something meaningful in the ruins of her former existence. I'm tired of running, Elena said finally. And I'm tired of being used by people who think human lives are just pieces on a chessboard. Michael nodded slowly. The people I killed, I can't bring them back. But maybe I can make sure their deaths weren't completely meaningless. Kim smiled for the first time since they had met her. That's what we were hoping you would say. As they boarded the jet, Elena turned for one last look at the Montana landscape. Somewhere out there, Chen was probably explaining to her superiors how 2 high-value assets had escaped during a routine apprehension operation. Somewhere else, Rebecca was wondering why her friend had vanished without explanation. And in Washington, people in expensive suits were deciding how to minimize the damage from another operational failure. But for the first time in years, Elena felt like she was making a choice that was truly her own. Not as a CIA operative following orders, not as a struggling recruit trying to find her place in a program designed to manipulate her, but as Elena Vasquez, a woman who had done terrible things and made serious mistakes, but who still believed that truth mattered and that some fights were worth the cost. The jet lifted off into the Montana sky, carrying her toward an uncertain future that nevertheless felt more hopeful than anything she had experienced in years. In the seat beside her, Michael stared out the window with an expression that might have been peace, or might have been the beginning of a different kind of war. Either way, they would face it together, former partners, former enemies, and now something else entirely. 2 ghosts who had decided to become human again, whatever the cost. The wooden owl in Elena's pocket seemed to pulse with warmth, Dimitri's reminder about wisdom and patience. But sometimes Elena thought wisdom meant knowing when patience was no longer enough. Sometimes wisdom meant choosing to fight, even when the odds were impossible and the enemy was the very system you had once served. Sometimes wisdom meant coming back from the dead to remind the world that some betrayals could not be forgiven, some truths could not be buried, and some people refused to disappear quietly into the darkness. The jet banked northeast, carrying them toward whatever came next: justice, revenge, redemption, or simply the chance to live as themselves rather than as weapons in someone else's war. For Elena Vasquez, that chance was enough. We hope you enjoyed this intense journey of espionage and redemption. Stories like this take considerable effort to craft and produce. If this thriller kept you on the edge of your seat, please subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss our latest releases.